Hi everyone, and welcome to another training session where we take a single technique from karate and then show you how the 5 dominant animal styles that comprised of Southern Shaolin, which is an area that heavily influenced the development of karate, how they might look at that technique to make it work for them. Remember that each of the animal styles has an entirely different physiology, methodology, and even ideology or tactic to how they would make it work. This is important to know because in combat, everything that we do should be governed by what our opponent presents. Their guard, their strategies, their stance, their favored techniques, their strengths and weaknesses, rather than just simply choosing what we like, what's in our wheelhouse. By having a broad understanding of different ways to make a single technique work for you, then you always have a plan B, a plan C for your combat training, be it in the dojo or out of the dojo. And today we're going to look at the lead hand straight punch. Let's get into it. The Tiger Kamae has hands in the corridor because this position allows us to execute strikes with the most amount of power. It's less proficient for defense, but in the wild, tigers don't block. We like to show a confidence with our hands and an eagerness to attack and constantly pressure forward to create hesitation in our opponent. And it's in this hesitation that the tiger attacks. We have a deeper, lower stance, which has plyometric ability. And at the end of our lead hand punch, we want to be right on top of our opponent. So your generic tactic for the tiger lead hand strike can be fantastic. But what happens when someone's tactic is superior to yours? You're facing a superior tiger who will anticipate you before you can land. Or you're facing a superior crane fighter who's very good with their counter-striking skills. This is where we need to have a plan B. We use the misdirection of the power front kick off our back leg to hopefully cause hesitation in that anticipator fighter, or even to draw the guard lower for the counter fighter. And then we use our lead hand over the top. We drilled our plan B when our tiger tactic was met with a superior serpent style tactic, someone who was able to constantly slip our strikes. And rather than retracting our strike, we started to drop our strike so that when the opponent tried to duck and come back up, they had an arm and our weight over their head to pin them down. So 1, 2, 1, 2. And then there were the dragon fighters whose superior physiology or tactics also rendered our tiger lunge useless because they were able to potentially lean back and use their peripheral kicks up at our head, or lean back and use a tatazuki or kagezuki, using these round techniques to our detriment. And we discussed the concept of purposefully telegraphing your lunge punch to give them what they want, but by the same token, coming in and standing tall so that where your head was, your shoulder now resides. And then we overcome them in a wave-like fashion. So when they're leaning back, we're able to swamp them with a head that is much taller. Aggressive fighters like to control the corridor, not only with their guard, but also their focus. They have a very tunnelized vision. They like to press the matter and get on with it. So they instantly recognize some sort of weakness in whatever kamae you present. And then when they sense the correct target, they will confidently and with conviction go for it. So one of the premises of our dragon style was to strike from unseen positions outside of their tunnelized vision. And equally, to constantly move the guard. Remember, a direct quote from Dragon Style is, "I ride the wind." Because when my hands are constantly moving, the tiger hesitates because it's hard to establish a confident plan because the openings are constantly changing. And it's in that moment of hesitation that the dragon will strike from an unseen position. But remember, every technique will break down. You will always encounter competent fighters who, no matter how much you try to attack from an unseen position, people who can put up a roof and still deflect those techniques and then make you pay for it. So that's where we switched from wind hands to hurricane hands, where our goal was to be a hurricane and remove the roof before using our lead hand technique, removing their front hand. But not just the hand. We also wanted to disrupt their entire arm and, if possible, their structure, to also therefore disrupt their mind before we used our jab. Even the strongest of roofs is torn down by a hurricane. Taking on a tiger is difficult. They're very physical and they're also very cunning. They like to control distance. And that's where we used our dragon takes flight concept with our lunge punch. As opposed to stepping in with our yoriashi, we used what you might call a version of a yumiyashi, stepping through with our stance. But it was the dragon takes flight style footwork, which covers more range, but equally doesn't have the predominant weakness of the tiger attack where our head remains in the firing line. We create a line of power through our arm from our leg, so we still maintain structural integrity in the technique, but our head is slightly to the side, meaning a pick-off fighter, an anticipator, or even a counter fighter has trouble targeting our head. Remember, the serpent doesn't have arms, so it needs to rely on its body for the defending and even for attacking. Now, some karateka see the hands down methodology as arrogant, and I guess in combat where someone is this close, of course it is. But serpent style understands that humans have billions of mirror neurons in their brain, which cause us to want to behave like those things or people we observe. It helps humans form societies. And so often when you are sparring an aggressive fighter and they're very eager to get things going, sometimes just dampening your guard and your physiology somewhat momentarily also sees them dampen and relax their defenses slightly. And that's where you use Totsugeki Raigeki, a lightning attack or a surprise attack. A snake in the wild, before striking, has one of two methodologies. First, its head leads the charge and the body is coiled behind it. So you can see here my head is over my knee and I've got that coil-like structure, which is going to allow me to extend myself out to get reach and my jab or my lead hand strike to score. Of course, my arms are down, which means with my head forward and my arms down, it seems vulnerable, but I have the opportunity or the positioning to slip laterally. But equally, if I post backwards, then I've got the coil of the snake shifting directions. So when you're confident with this as a style of defense, you will become more competent with it as a style of offense. And with our hands down, it often dampens the opponent's enthusiasm and guard, and that's when we strike. So we have our hand comes up from an unseen position outside of that tunnel vision they have. And we extend our body, in this case our head, to strike. And our back leg straightens up. course, the other positioning snakes will have in the wild is where they lean back. As opposed to an arrow-like attack, it's more of a catapult-like attack, a slingshot-style attack. Instead of going from a head posted forward, we go from almost a kokutsudachi, where our head is posted backward, which not only allows us to catapult ourselves forward, it also creates more distance between us and our opponent. And in this instance, rather than having no hands, we had two hands. And even though snakes don't have arms, the thing in this instance was our arms were snakes. They were two cobras. And when a cobra is up, its opponent goes on high alert. But then we use a technique called two sleeping cobras. We put our cobras to sleep. And the moment we sense our opponent relax, our first cobra strikes the wrist or the front guard of the opponent. And the second cobra would strike at the neck. Or because we're doing karate, we control the guard and then we strike the face. Remember, if you're walking through the grass and you enter the vicinity of a snake, it will often bite your ankle. And so we don't just have two cobras here, we've also got cobras at our feet to further distract our opponent's focus and guard, even their structure. So often in dojo kumite, the strategy or the physiology that students struggle with the most is the confident tiger who wants to step in and headhunt and maul. And in China, they say the best technique or the best style for dealing with a tiger is the white crane. And while tiger is the strongest of all the 5 animals, white crane is the weakest. So we're effectively fighting fire with water. We're using a complete opposite element, which is what makes it successful. Now, discussing the lead hand strike of a crane, where a tiger likes to use yoriashi, jump in with both feet, to completely minimize the distance so they can use their physical advantage. The crane, because it's got a weaker, frail body, understands that it uses more oyashi in its jab. In fact, if you've ever seen a boxing fight, 90% of the jabs or the lead hand gazamazukis that people throw are white crane style. It's not designed to finish an opponent. It's designed to sting the opponent. And if not sting, it also keeps the opponent's mind on you as opposed to them. It keeps them at distance. It's almost like a beware of the dog sign. And it also helps to understand their movements and create openings. So the white crane gazamazuki, we first started with our oyashi footwork and our weight was never committed. But again, retracting back to this position against an aggressive fighter can often bode poorly for you. So then we worked on the concept of crane, which was not only to keep distance, but also use the flanks. While the tiger likes to occupy the corridor, the crane willingly gives up the corridor and its kamae is wider. Its kamae is wider, the wings. And that's because it understands strength isn't its advantage anyway. So it would rather strike from outside the peripheral vision of that tiger that has tunnelized vision. And beyond that, a wider guard means while its techniques are weaker to strike, they're more effective to block. Because blocking inwards using the fast twitch muscles of the chest is a lot faster and stronger than blocking outwards using our outer deltoid and traps. And so they had their soft hands. Remember, you catch a tiger with a net. You don't need to drag a steel cage through the jungle. So their soft hands dealt with the tiger's aggression. But equally, it meant they could strike from unseen positions. Not wanting to be in the corridor, we executed our oyashi gazamazuki but then our back foot, almost like a mawate, shifted across and we recovered to the flanks. So we never spent much time with our body close to an aggressive predator. One of the sunjutsu, or the tactics of constantly jabbing in boxing, was to establish distance, to recognize patterns and create openings. So as a crane fighter, while you often like to stick and move, if you know your tactic is solid and the technique will likely land, that's where the crane is happy to use its beak, a much more powerful weapon. So using the yoriashi of the tiger, the crane commits all the way in. However, now our bodies are close, so it needs to have a backup plan. So after our wings are in, what does a bird do? Open its wings up. One, and we open up to the flanks. We move in and open up to the flanks. We move in with our beak and open up to the flanks. Again, all techniques and tactics break down. So you can be very confident in your lightness of using wings to be a counter fighter and occasionally sting an aggressive fighter with a jab. But sometimes you'll find that you just can't ever confidently feel you can commit to an attack. And that's where we use a very important senjutsu, or tactic, of white crane, which is misdirection. A crane will often use its wings to discombobulate, to distract an opponent so its legs can creep in. Or occasionally, if there's an opening, its beak will come in. And that's what we're going to use now. We're going to use our wings and our legs to distract and then jump in with our beak and peck. So if you're very comfortable in your crane, but every time you want to commit, your opponent is a superior tiger. They're constantly able to anticipate your movements. Or you're up against a superior crane fighter who can block and counter anything you do. Or a superior dragon fighter who can block and counter simultaneously, or lean and counter simultaneously. And that's what we're going to focus on now. Hands for distraction, legs for a further distraction or misdirection, to cause a hesitation in that anticipator, to cause the counter fighter to drop their guard, to deal with that kick. And then we're going to come over the top with our beak. And the beauty of close quarter combat is that your legs only need to rise slightly to elicit a flinch response and create that opening. So if we're close quarter, again, I can use my hands, create a flinch reflex with my leg, and then, well, in this case, because it's a lead punch tutorial, sting with my front hand. I'm using my wings not to cause power, to distract, even tap into their guard. When a lot of people start karate, they start off, I guess, learning how to use their body. And once they get some confidence and competence, they become a little more like a leopard. They've got that agility and mobility, the speed. And then as they get a little older and a little stronger, they become more like tigers. They're more patient, hunting their prey, moving through the grass steadily to get into the right distance to explode with that Iken Haisatsu style technique. And then as they get older again, because of having trained decades, I've seen this, they become more like White Crane because they get a little less mobile in the legs. So they rely on their fast hands to block counter and let their opponent do all the bridging work. So having said that, I know that I'm talking to a lot of older karateka who love White Crane, but don't necessarily resonate with this technique based on their body type. You can still use the same concept of misdirection, only you can use it both with your hands. Have your opponent thinking you're attacking from the south, but realistically attack from the north. So where previously we used our wings, our leg, and then our beak, this time we'll just use a wing, the wing of the bird, to elicit the focus and the guard, hopefully down for your opponent, to create an opening for that stinging technique. And it has to be a lead hand because this training session is on the lead hand. So we've got down, 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 up. And again, it doesn't matter what guard you choose or what type of kumite you use. Down, down, and when I go down, I'm creating a base, like a running race. This allows me to really spring into my next technique. I want to leave my other wing up because White Crane love to jab from an unseen position, where here the opponent's vision is on both of my hands. I want my opponent looking south, so that way when I strike from the north, it's unseen. 1, 2, 1, 2. 1, 2, 1, 2. We're putting the fake in at the start. Cranes always like to test the water of the pool, where the tiger jumps straight in. So if we jump straight in, assuming our opponent's going to fall for our misdirection, we could end up in hospital. So we want to always make sure that the water of the pool is warm. If we throw the fake and our opponent doesn't flinch or doesn't respond, they just stay on their guard, even look to anticipate, then we abort the mission, rotate around, and create a new tactic. Everything we do is governed by what our opponent presents. We need to elicit the movement of our opponent to know that this technique's going to work. So we must throw in our fake first. Close quarter. Or from full crane kamae. Remember the crane kamae, wings out, seems like it's vulnerable, but you're very fast to cover the corridor. And equally, you're discouraging peripheral strikes. And considering most people in real life swing wide, it's a good kamae to have, even tournament style kumite. Hyowaza, leopard technique. Be mindful the leopard is smaller than the tiger. So where a crane will use its soft arms to deflect the power of a tiger, or a serpent might use its agile body to slip a tiger, or a dragon might use the pivoting techniques or leaning back peripheral techniques to overcome a tiger, the leopard's technique, or senjutsu, its tactic, is to use its legs and agility to constantly frustrate the tiger because it's never a sitting duck. Remember, there are only two stationary things in a fight. One, a person that's unconscious, and two, a person that is about to be unconscious. So Hyowaza, leopard technique, is to constantly change the distance and the lateral movement so that the tiger, who's like a Top Gun fighter pilot, who wants to get you in his lock, and when he hits lock on, fire his missiles, never is able to get lock on. And that's when the leopard attacks. So obviously, lighter, more agile opponents can use this with speed. But even a floor to ceiling ball moving at medium pace is still a difficult target to hit. So even if you're a slower person, you can still use the leopard senjutsu to your advantage. Spending decades in karate, I've found, especially in like a dozen or more trips to Japan, instructors are constantly telling students to stand and be more like Kihon, which is that very white crane style concept. But the problem is when you're facing a tiger, a white crane can't adapt always the tiger mentality of stand and block like an oak tree, because a hurricane will uproot an oak tree. So sometimes you need to be more like grass. Even if prolific instructors are telling you not to be, you want to be a mobile target, a moving duck, as opposed to a sitting duck. The problem many karateka face with all this moving is that they're never able to launch their attack from wherever they are at the moment. They always seem to find that they need to establish a center and then attack, which is essentially telegraphing and equally giving the aggressive person exactly what they want, lock on, to attack themselves. So we need to learn to make our footwork bioavailable from our movement. So the two types of footwork we just worked on was the fact that the leopard is not as plyometrically explosive as a tiger, so it shortens its stance before it leaps, but it still does leap out like a tiger. And that's where we brought our back foot in and launched. Our back foot in and then launched. And the second type of footwork we covered was throwing both feet into the ground, like a ball that hits the ground and compresses and then springs out. We used our double beat to throw ourselves into the ground, and then that created a kinetic linking with the ground to create a more tiger-like explosion. So those two types of footwork created more of an even playing field when you're taking on a bigger, stronger, more explosive opponent, a tiger. But at the same time, if I'm just using those types of footwork in here, I'm still working within the tiger's comfort zone because I'm not actually using the concept of the moving target that the leopard so loves. So we need to make sure both of those types of footwork are bioavailable when we are using leopard senjutsu.